This is Big Man Tyrone, and you're about to watch the Mtg Cabal cast with your hosts, Woad, Thirsty, and Reptar. Sub to us on all your podcast networks at Mtg Cabal Cast and YouTube.
All right, guys, welcome to the newest episode of the Cabal cast. We've got a little bit of a lull in finance news, so we're actually going to be covering something that I don't see a lot of podcasts covering. Our pick history, failed specs, successful specs, what that means, what it looks like, what we do, etc. Admitting, you know what, sometimes we mess up, we get it wrong. Looking at the spreadsheet that we keep of our picks, I got it wrong a lot, at least based on current values. But that's okay.
Yep.
So let's just get started then.
All right. I'll start first because my specs are they're not all over the place, but I pick them up for various reasons and in various methods, and that kind of determines where things are. So I wanted to actually start with one of the only specs I have left that I was paying cash for when this was a card in standard, and it is a little 1/2 that could. I have about 50 Deathrite Shaman kicking it around here that I was picking up for cash when they were in standard alongside Abrupt Decay because the cards were good. Modern was still an up-and-coming format, so Deathrite Shaman had not really picked up yet or had been banned yet. But I was still picking them up into the banning, and Legacy was starting to kind of push the card a little more. So like, all right, I'll keep picking them up now because my players are done playing them in standard. They are banned in modern, and the only person that plays Jund already had their set, so I'm just going to pick them up casually, basically, at buy list. And I kept picking them up. I'm like, all right, either this card's going to pop in Legacy or it's going to be unbanned in modern. So I kept going at buy list, waiting for the card to go up in value. And it just never went up in value, but the card is just good. It was solid. It kept holding despite the fact that it was just a Legacy staple at the time, and then Commander, I guess. And then it was reprinted and then banned in Legacy. So finger guns, I'm left with like 50 Deathrite Shaman that I can't do much with.
Yeah.
And I got out of Abrupt Decays at some point for break-even or value. I was actually looking for them recently. I thought I still had them. I don't know where they are. So they sold out. And then the rest of what I have here is kind of... Well, one spec is still around from the same time period. This one's a little more unique. This was back in the heyday of Modern when Birthing Pod was still a card. Green-White Taxes was a deck, right? So in M15, they printed Hushwing Griff.
That card is great.
Yeah. Thalia number 2. The card is good. It's like, okay, if this deck is still going to be a thing, this card is going to be part of the deck. And then the deck never was a thing, and the card never saw play. But the nice part was that was not a cash buy. Those were always throw-ins because they were less than $1. Nobody played them in standard. They just kind of existed, floated along, fell out of existence. So they were just like even out of trade pickup kind of stuff. It was very easy, and I'm not sitting on many because I'd kind of learned my lesson from Abrupt Decay and Deathrite Shaman that just going too deep on stuff like this could lead to failure. And while there wasn't a lot of capital tied up in them because they're M15 in that era, I was more active in playing, so I had a lot more backstock to just trade away for this stuff. I didn't want to tie myself into this spec when there were other possibly good cards like Eidolons at the time and some other odds and ends for Modern that worked better in that metagame. And then from that, I kind of changed the way I did things, and I started looking more at EDH because that became a much more popular format. There was a very long time between the first and the second set of Commander decks. Between the Riku era and the next run, it was like 4 or 5 years, I think, something like that.
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
And I think we had a Modern Master set in between. And so WotC kind of gave Commander time to really simmer and pop up. And I'd changed jobs, I'd started making a little more money, and I was able to start pushing things around a little more and watching alternative formats and buying cards from different places to try and arbitrage or make money on. So I started watching for unique effects and things I can buy in on. And a lot of my specs at that time were fairly small and just quick churn. So trades trying to grind profit here and there. Not the buy list, actually. It was a lot of trading or cash into trade at the time. I hadn't really, not perfected, but really taken the time to do a lot of the buy list stuff. I was doing a TCG player store as kind of a not quite consignment for another player up here, but I basically had a lot of players who were like, I want this stuff sold. Like, I just want it gone. I want max value, and so I was running that.
Yeah.
And then I was taking that profit and re-upping it and moving into old school and reserve list. So along the way, Commander starts coming around, and they start printing a lot more unique effects in Standard, and cards that just kind of seem like they're going to slot into Commander product over time because these players establish themselves, they establish what they're doing, and you can kind of look at things and say, okay, this is a big, goofy effect, right? Or this card just draws cards at a very low and convenient price. So let's move on that. And when I went on, I had in my infinite spec box, right before Deathrite Shaman, is another little card, Bounty of the Luxa. I think I've got close to 100 Bounty of the Luxa, non-foil, and about 12 foil.
Same, actually.
It was a spec of ours early on.
Yeah.
And while I do have faith in this card to be a gainer over time, I consider this a failed spec because while I have moved in on it at a cheap price, I'm pretty sure I paid close to 50 cents for each of these. The card has done literal nothing.
Negative.
It is, this is an 400 count box, and it's just sitting in this box taking up space. That is not really what you want unless you know this is going to be a long-term spec. Yeah. I did not expect this card to be a 5-year spec. I thought it was going to be 1 to 3, and I'd be out of them. Lo and behold,
oops.
I'm still sitting here. I'm close to 100 of them. I think the card does have legs, and it is one of those effects that is unique. Unique is the wrong word here. It is a very Commander-style effect, where you do one thing one turn, you do another thing another turn, and one of them is drawing a card. Like, that's a very Commander-style effect. So it does lend itself to a reprint, and I am wary of that. And if it is reprinted, then that's when I'll lose, and this will be an absolutely failed spec.
Yeah.
100%. And one of the last ones I moved on for Commander only that I thought would be a quick flip, but has not turned into one, is Wormfang Manta.
Yeah.
And we discussed this card before the cast. And if you don't know what Wormfang Manta does, you're not alone. So, this is a 7-drop Nightmare Beast from Judgment. It's a 6/1 flyer that says when it ETBs, you skip your next turn. When it leaves play, you take an extra turn after this one. So why, in the year 2018, did I buy Haruruya out of foil and non-foil Wormfang Mantas for under 50 cents each? Well, 2018, if I was incorrect. Guilds of Rav was released, and with it, Lazav the Multifarious came along. Now, Lazav, as your commander, is a 2-drop, which allows you to pay X and turn Lazav into a copy of a creature that costs X from your graveyard. Well, if you pay 7, it can become a Wormfang Manta, and you don't get the ETB negative effect. All you have left is to find a way to sacrifice Lazav to gain an extra turn. While with Ashnod's Altar, 2 mana, and Nim Death Mantle, that is effectively infinite turns.
Yeah.
So I was banking on Lazav to pick up as a commander in EDH, pull in Wormfang Manta because it's yet another infinite turn combo, and take a card that was effectively bulk along for a ride. And we are sitting here almost a year later, and this card, I don't even know. It doesn't pain me to look at it. I just refuse to look it up.
It's interesting because something like that seems a lot more easier than the Wanderwine Prophets combo with Anala.
Yeah.
But when that leaked, like, Wanderwine Prophet foils shot up to $40 for a little bit, and they're still sitting around 20.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I remember picking some up from Card Kingdom for, $4 for foils and buy listing them to Card Kingdom for 15 each.
Yeah, this is now TCG market a 30-cent card, Wormfang Manta. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, exactly. So at this point, again, it is either a 5-year spec or a dud. And at this point, I think it's going to be a dud unless we get something ridiculous in the next couple of sets that makes this card worthwhile, which is always a distinct possibility.
Yeah.
Always is a distinct possibility. So I'm not unhappy to hold it because it does loop. Unlike Bounty of Luxa, which is just like kind of a pillow 40 card, this card does things. It gets the job done. It's like Colt 45, right? Works every time.
Every time.
Every time. And from there, that's how I learned along the way. So when I picked up these specs and I failed on specs that I went deep on, it was all a learning experience. A lot of the specs that I went on short on, things like Sliver Hive, I didn't go tall on, I went short on, were wins because they were easier to see a long-term growth in those cards.
Yeah.
And so picking up Sliver Hive and Urborg's Nykthos, like these obviously powerful cards that have obviously applicable effects in multiple formats, turned out to be a lot better than just trying to find these niche little cards that are going to be good in one format. The exception to this rule thus far is Sunbird's Winvocation. I still have 1 million of them, and I still believe in that card because I don't think people have tried it. That's really what I think it comes down to. And this card can only be played so many times on different Commander series before people just see how good it is. And it could just be that it rotates in September, and then 6 months later, it goes up. It could be a year after that. But I think this card is currently held down by the fact that it's in Standard. It's going to see rotation soon. And for whatever reason, it's just not like a perennial red card yet. Or in a mono red deck or a red X style deck. Eventually, we'll get there on it, and I'm fine sitting on it. And if you see me looking down, it's because I literally have 2 of my spec boxes next to me. One just labeled Infinite Quantity, which is where my my Sunbird's...
Wormfang Mantis.
That's the second card in the box, for what it's worth. And then into Sunbird Invocation, Bounty of Luxa, Deathrite Shaman, and Simic Ascendancy. Anything that I have more than like 8 copies of goes in this box.
Yeah.
The one box we don't see here, and this is kind of what my specking has really led to, is this box of cards that at any moment is ready to pop. And I think that's where my abrupt decay, my leftover abrupt decays are. That's where my Court of Callings are. My foil collected companies, my foil scavenging uses. All these cards that saw Modern play had a price that was either too low for the time or was depressed for some reason, like scavenging is, that the moment they come back, can and will just go up. Monastery Mentor was in that box. And when that popped in Vintage and Legacy with the top combo, I outed my Mentors.
Yeah.
So like these two kind of like hot medium boxes of, maybe 800 cards has led to this one distilled fat pack of like pure fire.
Yeah. And
this has been a multi-year process, starting at Return to Rav. I started coming back, so I had to infuse my collection with cash because I moved from one state to another. I changed jobs. I wanted to start playing Standard again, so I had to start somewhere. And so it was just a lot of re-infusing with cash and trying to make smart decisions in the short term. That sometimes turned into the long term. That sometimes turned into burning me.
Yeah.
There's that.
That happens.
Yep. But in the meantime, Modern came up, Legacy popped, and I, through the help of channels like our Discord and a number of other groups, I've been able to kind of grow as a speculator and somebody who is able to finance his own game, through this.
Yeah. My start with like actual specking was back when, recently actually, Aether Revolt got released. And I remember being at a local game store with some friends, and I was like, man, Fatal Push looks insane. True Name Nemesis should be twice as much as it is. Because at that point, Swords was the removal spell in the format, and I was like, well, this dodges Swords, and it dodges Fatal Push, so if Fatal Push is everywhere, True Name's gonna go up.
Oh, yeah.
So at the time, True Name was $15. And then I was like, well, I'm going to buy like 50 of these. And then they shot up to like $35, $40 for a little bit. I buy listed them at the time for 20 to 25 each. And out we went. Earlier on in the history of the podcast, we said our idea of a good market manipulation is bumping Soldevi excavations up to the front page of MTG stocks. I actually was able to out some specs similar to that, not quite Soldevi excavations, because that did not work very well.
A solid reserveless card.
Yeah.
Oh, baby.
Yeah, that's moral of the story. Failed specs are stuff like Psychic Vortex. This bag has like 40 of them in here. And it's trash. Why is it here?
Oh, hot garbage.
Yeah. So I actually, when I hit a spec that I think is good, I'm not super greedy. Like a while ago, I called Kiki Jiki. I think it was week like 13 or something like that.
Yeah.
And at the time, the market on it was $11. Well, I was able to get them, and I know because I'm looking at my TCG order history right now. This was a cash pickup for me. I was able to get them for around $7 each. There was recently a buy list that had them for $10 on it, so I buy listed every single one for $10. On the cash ones, I'm a lot less attached to those, and I tend to be like, do I get my 20%? Great, out it goes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in terms of picking up with trades, I actually have, in my trade binder, there is a page of the stuff I'm trying to pick up in trade. And the stuff I pick up in trade, I'm actually, oddly enough, is way less liquid to me.
Mm-hmm.
When I pick it up in a trade, like I've been trying to get F&M Lightning Greaves in as many trades as I can. I want to hold on to all of those until I can get like 30 to 40% up. Or if I can trade them out at double what I got them at. And I think that's the contrast in your and my style is, you're very much like, well, get it for a throw-in is where you go with your trades.
Yes.
And I actually, the stuff that tends to be a little bit more expensive on the cash side is actually what I try to get in trades. So, I'm out here trying to get stuff like, time vaults in a trade. Which,
yeah, but that's not a throw-in.
Probably a bad example. But, and then, Sarkhan's Unsealing, I'm like, all right, well, I've got $30 to spend. Let's go to TCG Player, and I've spent $30 on way less than that. So find all of the sellers with 4 or more and just buy them.
That's how I did Bounty of Luxa and all those other small ones.
Yeah. It's, it's not worth your time, really, to go out there and be like, all right, well, let me see who's got what I'm looking for, and maybe pick up one every couple weeks, especially because that stuff often isn't in people's trade binders. But, my thing is, and I've said this before, when I go in on a spec, I decide what's my timeline here. So if my timeline on a card is 6 months, I throw it in the box, I write the date on it, 6 months later, I pull it out.
Yep.
And if I can make anything on it at that point, usually I'm like, out of here.
Yeah.
But then there's, similar, the infinite time specs, such as for me, here's Energy Field. This has about 20 energy fields in it, which was my pick a few weeks ago. That's one that, to me, I see as more of an infinite timeline.
Yeah.
I don't expect it to just pop. It's one of those cards that inevitably is like a card away from breaking. Similar almost to Shadow of the Grave. That
the
really
return cycling card?
Yeah. The return cycling card. That's a card that I will always try to pick up. I'll dig through bulk boxes, or if I have extra credit at a shop I'm not going to come back to, it's like, all right, well, let me dig through your Amonkhet binder and see if I can find it, because it's a card that seems like it's a day away from breaking.
Yeah, I actually want to check something on that, because I play it in my Xur deck, and I think you have to. Like, if you're playing Xur, you're going to be getting Astral Slide and now Astral Glide, right? So that means you're just going to be cycling through a bunch of stuff. Okay.
Yeah. Market's 38 cents. I mean, it's still...
Yeah, Xur isn't even the number 1 commander for that card. It's in the top 3, 4, 5. It's in the top 5. One of them is Glint-Eye Nephilim, listed as unofficial.
That's the 4-mana Nephilim guy, yeah.
Grixis in green or Jund in blue, however you want to look at it, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's to me, that's a must-have card if you're playing Xur, or I guess really only Xur. The Earl is not black, it's Nea, right?
Yeah.
Earl the Miststalker, yeah. No, I agree. And now that we have cycling back in Modern, I maintain that deck is banned. Some people are playing around with other colors, but who knows? Like, it could splash black for Shadow of the Grave for some kill that I haven't seen.
But this Shadow of the Grave, to me, is a spec that's never going to fail. I'll just sit on it forever until I get it.
Yeah.
But if I go into a spec such as Psychic Vortex, again, and I know Look, this is a massive failure. There's no reserve list bubble again. It popped, and
Yeah.
the market is where it is. Now I'm sitting on these that aren't even on buy list for 20 cents. At that point, I'll probably use this as packing material.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's important to know, like, all right, what's my timeline? And that's how I determine my failed or successful specs.
Yeah.
And, if it's failed, gone. If it's successful and I think it has room to grow, maybe hold on to it. But typically, again, once I hit that 20%, I'm out.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I got my margin, I get cash back. Or, in some cases, it's 20% up on cash and 50% on credit.
Yeah.
Depending, Card Kingdom, Miniature Market, wherever you're going.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's, to me, the way that I've done it is I'm a much more structured spec person by and large. Exceptions like Shadow of the Grave, or I have these promo dismisses. Yeah, it's all blue cards. Sorry.
Oh. Look at you.
Yeah. These are, this is Starfoil. I love them.
Oh, yeah.
Like I said, they're the next big thing, I think. So that type of stuff is, at what point do I decide, art versus science? I guess I'm going to get rid of them now.
No, I get that. And I think that's kind of important an important point to talk about in the art versus science thing is that if you're going to sit on a spec and you want to turn it quickly, you should be very aware of what you paid for it so you know what your price out is. The nice part about the spec box that I have, just my one row, is that almost every one of these was throw-ins because they were effectively all cards in standard. There are things in here like F&M ringleaders that I've been buying for years at about $2 each. I have a number of F&M War Chiefs, both versions.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the rest of this box is all standard, like bulk-ish cards that look like they could or should see play in other formats. And I think it is very important to understand what you spent on your cards so you know when to get out on them. Especially if you're spending cash on them or you're hunting them down in binders.
Yeah. And that's the one thing, like for cash especially, I love TCG Player because you could just go to order history all time.
Yep.
And like I can find out, on these Soldevia excavations, I am stubborn and I am not going to out them except for 20%.
Oh, jeez.
Never happening. I'm just going to sit on these forever. I paid between $4 and $6.
Jeez.
So it's just not happening. I'm stuck with these things for fucking ever. And that's the thing that I think a lot of people aren't necessarily mindful of is what they've spent.
Yeah.
On their specs and when to out them for a profit. And that's that's my entire model for it. Mm-hmm. That's how I decide what's failed. That's why I decide when to get rid of it. That's just the way I do it.
No, it's definitely the way to go. And like there are some cards that I can definitely go back on and look at the price, and every now and I do to kind of lament it. I was thinking about it because I know with the Urza deck popping up after KCI being banned, like a lot of the pieces in that deck lost value. But Semblance Anvil was always floated around, and I had a bunch of them. So I actually just now was like, I wonder what the price on that card is, and I'm still buy listing like 70 cents short, I think, of what I paid for it.
Oof.
Yeah. Big oof. But I mean, the card is nuts. It's another Cloud Key style card that is most likely never going to come back.
No, if it does, it would just be insane.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's one of those things, like you said, like Cloud Key. It'll just sit there, and one day you'll look up, and it'll be a $10 card, and you're like, well, all right, I guess.
Exactly. And so something like that, I'm not too hard up on for sitting on and just waiting. Like, spells you cost a chair, a card type with the exiled card cost 2 less, right? So you can exile like any non-land card. It's
Mycosynth Lattice with artifacts. It's great, guys. Let's do it.
Exactly. It it's all part and parcel. Oh, stop shaking your head. It's all part and parcel of that. Like, it is what it is, and Semblance Ample is just an enabler.
Yeah.
And so as a combo enabler, I'm happy sitting on that. That's the difference between this and like Wormfang Manta. Lazav is the enabler. Wormfang Manta is part of the combo. So it's like kind of dicey. Same thing with Nim Death Mantle. Nim Death Mantle can be used all over the place in a number of combos, but compared to something like Ashnod's Altar, it's not nearly as good. The Sacrifice Outlet is generally almost always more important than the Nim Death Mantle piece of it.
Yeah.
Like the enabler, the sack outlet is always going to be more important than the thing that returns it, because there you have options.
Yeah.
If you wanted to, you could sack it, sack Lazav, put it in your graveyard to get the extra turn effect, put it back on top of your library with Haunted Crossroads or with Volrath Stronghold, draw it in your extra turn, play it, like all that again because of Ashnod's Altar. You don't need the Nim Death Mantle.
Yeah.
So that's also part of it too. Is you got to know, if you're looking at combo cards, what part of the combo it is, why is it important to that combo, and is it replaceable or is it redundant? And from there, you can kind of pick and choose what you want to do and how you want to handle things. And I think the difference in the way we do things is also really important too, because for somebody who's just playing standard or modern and wants to just kind of like quote unquote grind their way through finance, they're most likely going to be doing a lot of work in binders. And so you got to figure out, do you want to churn quickly, or do you want to wait a little bit and then churn? Do you want to sit on things and then hope they go up, a la like that box that I have that was made up of all like standard hits?
Yeah.
What do you want to do? And it's really important to track your wins and your losses, because they do balance out. If you are an accountant, you don't just track how much money your company brought in. You have to track how much you've spent, and that's going to tell you your overall profitability. Even if for some reason you think your time is worth 0, and so you're not going to account for that, you are going to have to take into consideration the ramifications of your losses along with your wins. And for every day that you're not outing those specs, they're tying up money usually, and space.
Yeah.
Both are usually your premiums. So, like, I just created like my 4th quote unquote box. And it's another 800 count, and that's basically as big as I'm going to go. But that's because I finally had to separate out reserve list and old school. Because they're contained in their own little bubble compared to everything else. I had to go through like my EDH, the boxes I have for like EDH cards, and my spec boxes, and just kind of pull it all together, because reserve list just floats around and does its own thing.
Yeah, and who knows what's going to actually happen.
Exactly, and I just want it in one place to quickly look. Otherwise, like I said, it's like my infinite quantity box, my like generic spec box, and then like that gas box. It's just like I got to check in every couple of weeks to see what's popped and why.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think this is a very important lesson for people to learn, and failure is generally the way you learn and grow. If nobody succeeds 100% of the time, there's generally a failure, unless you're like Seth MacFarlane, and then you hit with your demo Family Guy reel on Adult Swim. Or
and
Cartoon Network,
it's all
and
gas.
It takes off. Yeah, like you just win forever. But
yeah,
we are not him.
No.
Shocker. But I'm gonna move into picks. You are.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's take it away.
All right. So I want to go first because my pick is hot, and it is quadded this weekend. Between when I announced it and today, it is blown the F up. And it is Aria of Flame. I sat on this card and waited for it to kind of do some stuff because I was wary about the ETB clause of gain 10 life, and Storm hasn't really been putting up results. So you need to find another deck for it. And lo, Jerry T comes to the rescue and starts playing it in Phoenix to 5-0s.
Yeah.
By the time you play your 3rd spell, you've only given your opponent 1 life. After that, you just start doming them easily for the win. Aria is an outstanding card and has gone from under $1 midweek to over 4, or just about 4 as of this recording.
Yeah.
I was going to move into this card on Friday, but thanks to Delta tying up money for multiple flights and not refunding me, I was not able to. Yeah, it was great. Yeah, I got all my money back yesterday after this card had just fucking rocketed.
Exploded, yeah.
So like, all right, I have missed the boat on this. In the next couple of days, we'll probably see it settle at 5, and it'll hold there for a little while longer. Right now, there's a problem with visibility into the modern deck lists that are 5-0ing. And just modern results as a whole. So you're going to have to wait on that. And the more we see these results roll in, the more we see Aria in those result sets, we're going to see the card tick up and up and up. I expect it to be probably an $8 to $10 card by the end of July, as long as modern is still a format people are playing. I don't know if it'll be at a Pro Tour, because if I had to guess, most of those guys are going to be on Hogak or decks that answer Hogak. And while Phoenix is good, it does suffer splash damage from Hogak hate. Aria of Flame does sidestep that because it only cares about cards you're casting from hand, so you don't have to worry about recurring the Phoenix. You just keep drawing cards and dealing damage with Aria. It's a way better Sphinx's Bone Wand.
Yeah.
And I think this card has both short and long-term playability. There'll probably be a gap in the middle where it'll dive down a little bit in terms of popularity, because the format is definitely going to shift once Hogak is solved, either by a ban or just by the format itself.
Yeah.
And then we'll see it tick back up as a long-term player in this format. It is a goofy card, so it could see some kind of EDH reprint in years to come, but I doubt it. They haven't reprinted, Magmatic Vortex, or the one where you throw lands at people's face yet?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
that was a card before the Jund Lands deck Matters was printed for Commander, so who knows the timeline.
Yeah.
But if you can get in for under 3 and wait until Byleth trade or sell direct for 5 in a couple of weeks, you're going to make your money back, and I think this is a good... I don't want to call it a pump and dump, because
I think that option's there, but I think it's fine long term as well.
It's going to be worth more and on a longer timeline than a pump and dump.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm hesitant to call that. I would think somewhere between 1 and 3 months is your opportune time to get out in the short run, and then after that, like I said, maybe late winter, early spring next year. It could be when it cycles back around again, once I expect it to take its dive and come back.
Yeah.
But that is me.
All right, and speaking of answers to Hogak, my pick is RTR Rip. So one of the nice things we know about the London Mulligan is that it does reward linear strategies, such as Hogak. Mm-hmm. It also rewards you for running random sideboard pieces that have utility in the main, such as Rest in Peace and all of the blue-white lists, which Mr. Gabriel Nassif had been doing for quite some time prior to Hogak being printed. He was on 1 or 2 in his main. I think this is one of the better pieces that you can have in your main for general graveyard hate. Mm-hmm. Leyline stops Hogak a lot better, but Hogak is not the only deck. Probably will be, like you said, the only deck at the Pro Tour, Mythic Championship. But I think that as the meta starts to adapt, we're going to see an uptick in the amount of people playing Rest in Peace, either in their main or their side. Mm-hmm. And I think you may even see a case where you have, some Abzan lists coming back, because having access to Path as well as Rip out of the board puts it in a much better position than like a Rock list. Yeah. So whereas this has kind of fallen out of favor lately, I think that it's pretty well positioned. The reason I went for RTR instead of A25 is that RTR's somehow cheaper by about $1 on average than the A25 list. Additionally,
look at that.
Yeah, it's not, unfortunately, the one you're likely to find in people's trade binders as much, but I definitely think that it has a lot more room to grow than the A25. A25 paper stock is just bad, which I don't like. I don't like the border, any of it. Like, there's just a lot of strikes for me personally against it. So I'm up to about 11 non-foil rips now in the spec box, and it's just something that I think as the meta adapts, we'll start to see it have a bigger role. Not to mention that, the art is done by Therese Nielsen, which who knows if she's ever going to do art again.
Yeah. What do you think happens when the spellbook comes out?
So when the spellbook comes out, I actually expect to see a little bit of a dip.
Okay.
The spellbook art is currently you're looking at a low of around 889. I know it hits, it hasn't released yet, so this is obviously all pre-sales.
Yeah.
But I think it's likely that you'll see in about maybe a month, once these hit, these will be the low-hanging fruit.
Okay.
Rather than, at least the non-foils, than the RTR one. But I still think that long-term, generally I feel like, at least based on what we saw with Jace, there's no money in these things.
No.
I mean, obviously, this one is pretty stacked. You've got a good list of stuff that probably needed a reprint. You've got a unique Path to Exile, a Worship, Rest in Peace, Martyr's Bond was randomly too much money. But I think that it's likely going to be harder to move a spellbook ones, and I think the RTRs you'll be able to get out of real quick.
So, a question about the spellbooks, because I honestly forgot. It's a set number of cards plus 1 random, and the 1 random is guaranteed to be a foil of any of the cards in the spellbook?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's 8 cards in this one. We've got True Conviction, Worship, Shielded by Faith, Rip, Path, Bond, Jura, and Blackblade Reforged because tie-in for the storyline.
Yeah.
But the Blackblade has sweet Richard Kane Ferguson art. And then, one of those is randomly a foil. So I think you'll probably see, Seb did an art for one of them. I think that one's probably going to be the Chase foil because everybody loves Seb McKinnon right now. So
I've been asked a lot from the Jace deck foil gifts, foil counterspell, and foil brainstorm because it is the cheapest way to get all those cards in foil. Yeah. Mystical Tutor. Some people hem and haw between original art but FTV foiling, right? It's FTV 20 or something. And the new Mystical Tutor art from the Jace book, but never really the non-foils.
And I mean that's the thing is that those cards are desirable because of how cheap they are.
Yeah. Because
they're the cheapest way to foil out your legacy deck with brainstorms and counter spells if you need them.
Yep.
I mean, the brainstorm's down to $9 now. At one point, it was 30.
Yep. Yeah.
It's only gone down.
Yeah.
So I think that it's definitely something to be aware of. I just don't think you really need to worry about it that much.
No. Okay. I was just curious about that because I honestly didn't remember what the Jace deck did to a lot of the similar cards that saw high end play. I mean, it's obvious that it's not going to affect things like Brainstorm from Mercadian Masks and FNM Brainstorm, Mercadian Masks Counterspell, and 7th Edition Counterspell because those are very sought after cards with very unique art in a very low print run, so those prices weren't going to budge. Then you have things like Mystical Tutor, which is only playable in EDH, because who cares about Vintage, I guess, and Gifts in Gift Storm.
And Gifts is, at the time, it was a $5 card when the spellbook released, and it dipped down to $3, and now it's, for the non-modern Masters one, like Champions, you're still looking at about $3 to $5.
Yeah. It's not a deck anymore.
Yeah.
People are holding off. I mean, maybe it comes back with Aria of Flame, maybe it's just lurking in the 4-1s, we haven't seen it, or maybe it's picked up 5-0s and we don't see it because they don't release every 5-0 list anymore, but...
Yeah.
It's good to know and good to keep an eye on it because the announcement about the Gideon Jura spellbook has been pretty light. They had the oopsie in April where they made it sound like they were releasing it on the same weekend as War of the Spark or something like that.
Yeah, and that was awful.
Yeah, and then they recanted on that and gave us a release date in the next couple of weeks. But I like Rest in Peace as a long-term hold because it always has playability in EDH and other singleton formats like that. People love to play in the graveyard, so if you're going to play white, you might as well play as many ways to just kind of slow that one down as that in the bud.
Interestingly enough, I just realized from the Gideon spellbook, Martyr's Bond in there is the only way to get that card foil is the spellbook because it was a commander-only release.
That's cute.
Yeah,
so
rip that card.
That might be an interesting long-term hold if anybody wants to move into EDH only foils.
It's also the Seb art, so there's another reason.
There you go.
Yeah. All right, well.
Yeah, that's it for me this week.
Same.
You good? All right, guys.
Thanks for tuning in, guys.
Yeah, that's been the Cabal Cast for this week. I am at Halt, I am Reptar on Twitter.
I am at Thirsty Sizzler.
We are at MTG Cabalcast on Twitter and on Patreon, and we are still looking for people to fill the last few gaps in our Patreon for the UMA giveaway.
Yep. Well, thanks for tuning in, guys. Catch you later.
See you.